If you own an iPhone, Apple already won. Not because it's the best phone, not because of the camera, not even because of the price. Apple won the moment you stopped thinking about leaving. And that's because Apple isn't a product company anymore. It's an ecosystem company. Most companies sell products. Apple sells continuity. Your photos follow you, your messages follow you, your passwords, subscriptions, payments, all follow you. Nothing breaks. Nothing asks questions. Nothing forces decisions. That smoothness isn't a feature. It's the trap. Apple doesn't care which device you buy first. iPhone, MacBook, Apple Watch, AirPods. They all serve the same purpose: to make the next Apple product feel obvious, and every non-Apple product feel wrong. Not worse, just wrong. That feeling is psychological friction, and it's worth more than any hardware margin Apple could ever earn. Apple doesn't lock you in with contracts. It locks you in with invisible dependencies: iMessage histories, iCloud storage, AirDrop habits, App Store purchases, family sharing, Apple Pay. Leaving Apple doesn't feel like switching phones. It feels like erasing yourself. Your photos don't migrate cleanly. Your messages don't carry over properly. Your accessories stop making sense. So people don't leave. They postpone the decision. And postponing the decision is the same as staying. This is where Apple's strategy becomes psychological. Humans are loss-averse. We don't hate bad outcomes. We hate losing what we already have. Apple understands this better than almost any company on Earth. Switching away from Apple doesn't feel like gaining something new. It feels like losing convenience, losing familiarity, losing status. Even small things matter. Green bubbles, missing reactions, AirDrop not working in group settings. Apple never says you can't leave. It just quietly raises the social and mental cost of doing so. That's why Apple's retention rate stays above 90%. Not because users are loyal, because leaving feels irrational. And once users stay, Apple doesn't need to convince them anymore. That's when services take over. Services don't ship. They don't break. They don't need upgrades. They just bill. Every subscription, every in-app purchase, every App Store transaction. Apple doesn't need you to buy another phone this year. It just needs you to stay one more month, then another, then indefinitely. Apple's ecosystem doesn't just shape behavior, it reshapes economics. Once you're inside, Apple starts earning from things you don't consciously notice. iCloud storage slowly fills up. 200 gigabytes becomes necessary. Then 2 terabytes feels reasonable. Apple Music replaces purchases. Apple TV Plus folds into your routine. Apple Pay becomes muscle memory. None of these feel expensive on their own, but together they turn Apple into a monthly expense you don't question. And that's the real shift. Apple moves from being something you buy to something you maintain. At that point, price sensitivity disappears. Not because Apple is cheap, but because switching would cost more than staying. Most people believe they'll leave Apple eventually. They say they'll switch next time, or after the next upgrade, or when the price goes up too much. But that moment rarely comes, because Apple times its friction carefully. Every year, switching feels slightly harder than the year before. More photos, more messages, more devices, more habits. Leaving isn't a single decision. It's dozens of small ones. And humans are terrible at making painful decisions repeatedly. So they delay. And delay turns into permanence. Not because Apple forces it, but because Apple designed for it. But Apple's ecosystem doesn't just trap users, it traps businesses too. If you're a developer, Apple controls your access to customers, the device, the operating system, the App Store, the payments. If you want to sell software to Apple users, Apple takes a cut. And if your app competes with Apple's own services, Apple still sets the rules. This isn't just vertical integration, it's leverage. Developers can't leave because users won't leave. And users won't leave because developers can't leave. The ecosystem reinforces itself. That's why regulation struggles to break it. Governments can fine Apple. They can force wording changes. They can argue about percentages. But regulation can't move habits. It can't move photos. It can't move group chats. It can't move years of digital life. Even when Apple adjusts its policies, the ecosystem remains intact because the lock-in isn't technical, it's behavioral, and behavior doesn't respond to headlines, it responds to convenience. There's one final reason Apple's ecosystem is so hard to escape: time. The longer you stay, the more Apple benefits. Your photos accumulate, your backups grow, your subscriptions layer on top of each other. What started as a phone becomes a history. Years of messages, years of memories, years of habits. At that point, leaving doesn't feel like switching brands. It feels like abandoning a timeline. And most people don't walk away from their past. They carry it forward, right where Apple wants it. And once that inertia sets in, it becomes self-reinforcing. Every year makes leaving harder. Every upgrade deepens the roots. Not because Apple demands it, but because comfort compounds. And this is the part most people miss. Apple doesn't need to improve dramatically anymore. It just needs to stay familiar. Familiar is powerful. Familiar feels safe. Familiar feels efficient. Familiar feels like the least risky option. So even when better alternatives exist, most people don't explore them. They stay where everything already works. That's not loyalty. That's inertia. Apple doesn't sell phones, it sells permanence. Once you're inside, Apple doesn't have to persuade you again. It just has to make leaving feel slightly worse than staying. And that's why this isn't just the most profitable company in tech. It's the most profitable ecosystem ever built. This is Biz Decoded. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.